Shall we start? Hello, everybody. My God, I'm so happy to be here. I'm so glad to be here. I'm Hugo. I'm head of design at Monzo. You know what Monzo is? It's a digital bank. We have hot coral cards. It's really cool just to sign up. I have my laptop with my notes and all that because I'm terrible at remembering things. Okay, so I don't want to lose track. So today, thank you very much for being here. This is an event that is part of, we're calling Monzo 2.0, and we are running a bunch of events across the UK. So we have this one here. Tomorrow, I think, it's in Cardiff, right? And I think next week it's on Edinburgh. About different topics, about the things that align with our values and the things that we care at Monzo. And today is about design. And what we've done, and I'm so proud and so grateful, is to put together this panel that I think is going to be super cool. So we have a bunch of different questions and things. We'll spend, I think, like half an hour chatting here with different questions, and then we'll have, I think, like another half an hour, 20 minutes to answer your questions. So go thinking about things that you want to poke a bit further, and then at the end we'll have barbecue and stuff. So yeah, great panel today. I'm going to introduce you, and maybe you tell us a bit about yourselves. So Simon, if you could take the mic.
So I'm Simon Hurst. I'm a user researcher. I work currently for Corp Digital. Before that, I was in government for about 18 years. Not always in user research, but user research about 6-7 years.
That's awesome.
Is that enough? Or?
I think it's great. Thank you very much. Lorna, what about you?
Thanks. Hi, I'm Lorna Kenwright. So I'm a senior UX designer at the Hook Group. So we're a large e-commerce sort of online retailer that operate a number of health and fitness and beauty brands. I have only been there for a few months, and previous to that I was at Shop Direct for a number of years. And in my spare time I help organise the Ladies at UX Liverpool meetup network. So yeah, that's me.
That's great.
Hi, I'm Jonny Rae-Evans. I'm head of products innovation at the Big Lottery Fund. We use money raised by National Lottery to help communities in the UK. I also co-founded an organisation called Tech for Good Live, which is to encourage people who work in tech to use their skills to help with social change, and for charities to work with people in tech.
That's fantastic. So thank you, the three of you, for being here. As I was saying, we've kind of divided this in 3 sections. We are going to be talking about insights and inspiration, then about kind of like the constraints that companies or designers need to face in order to deliver, and then the impact of what they do. And we'll be putting like 10 minutes on each of these sections, just so you get a picture of this. So my first question is if you feel that design is always in reality, is always rooted in actual needs and research of what people need and empathy, or there's other reasons to do things. So, I don't know, Simon, what do you think? Take them. We can do different order. You can like shuffle around.
Did you pick on me because I'm a user researcher? So I have
Maybe.
to say yes. I would probably say to a large extent. So you need to understand what the need is for you to be able to tackle any problem. But like the notes talk about like this concept of the if I'd have asked users what they wanted, they'd have said a faster horse. But it's not about good user research. Isn't about asking what people want. You don't. I would never ever do a research session where I walk into and say, oh, what do you want from us? What do you want us to build? Because people don't know I've done user research training in government, and we use the faster horse analogy quite a bit. Does everyone know the faster horse?
No, we don't.
Analogy.
Explain it.
So the argument is that you get quite a lot of people saying, if Henry Ford would have asked users what they wanted, they'd have said a faster horse. So Henry Ford didn't ask people what they want; he just went out and created the motor car. But if Henry Ford had done user research in the way that I would do it and good user researchers would do it, and probably a lot of designers who go out and do research as well would do it, is you just talk to people. If they said, I need a faster horse, you'd be saying, well, why? What does a faster horse enable you to do? What are you trying to achieve? Because there's so many things you might be trying to achieve that a faster horse enables. So it might have been, well, actually, my job's a delivery driver, so I need to be able to carry 10 parcels. I can only get 2 on a horse. So if my horse goes faster, I can get back to the area where my other parcels are and deliver them quicker. But actually then, as designers, what I do from a research perspective, I enable the designer to understand the problem. And the designer could then say, well, we'll design a car. Or actually, we'll give you 2 horses. Or we'll give you a motor car. Or we'll give you a plane. Or actually, we will you're delivering vinyl records. So actually, why don't we digitize all music? And then you don't need to deliver the thing at all. So the user need is to get stuff to people faster. So if I'm trying to sell something, the quicker I can get it to people, the quicker you start to consume it, pay for it. So that the user need is fairly clear. That would be my perspective.
That makes total sense.
Cool.
So I wonder, and maybe this is for you, Lorna, like have you seen on your experience in e-commerce this kind of thing? Like, I don't know, like things that we kind of give for granted, maybe because Amazon is doing it, but we don't even consider why customers really need that?
Yeah, I think absolutely. And that happens a lot just because you see something working really well on a kind of, a really notable website doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to work for your users as well. But that's where the research really comes in, and that's why it's important to research with your own users where possible. I think as designers and researchers, we're always going to want to be rooted in the needs of the user, but we're always going to face business constraints and business challenges, and that's just part of the nature of the work as well, whether they be tech constraints, deadlines. But yeah, it's all part and parcel.
So that's like following up on that question. Like, does the inspiration, in your opinion, come from the reality of the customers, or there's I wonder where is the kind of like the genius thing of like Steve Jobs or whatever, like this person that comes with a clear vision of how the future looks, and then magically everybody kind of aligns with that's what they really needed. Is that bullshit? Is that something that happens once in a million?
Well, obviously worked for Steve Jobs, but I think I've seen it so many times where if you get your real users in a setting and you face them with a journey, something that you're designing for, it'll really open your eyes as to like the real problems that they might face as people trying to use your website or whatever it is, your mobile app. So I just would say from experience I couldn't put enough value behind that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
No, please. Add to that as well, that's all right. I think a key thing is like the question of can you design without research, and what about the magical visionary who comes in? For the magical visionary one, I think that can do a lot of harm, that perception to our business, because it suggests that there is something magical about what designers do, that it isn't like fucking hard work and there is graft involved, there is a process that you follow. If you are designing a product without research, if you're designing a product that's not just for you and people interact with it, you're obligated to interact with those users. If not, it is a badly designed product. And I don't care if it's successful. If you make a product and you just dream up in your head, you do it in your room, you don't speak to anyone, if it is successful, it's pure dumb luck. That's why. So it's still a poorly designed product. It's just lucky that it's successful. And there's this concept of that visionary who comes in. There are people who are fantastic at design. There are people like me who are not fantastic at design. But to do well at it, and to do it properly, and to do it ethically as well, if you're designing a product for people, you need to understand the needs of those people in the product space that you're working on. But you also need to understand their wider needs. Like, this thing I make is to solve a problem. Could it cause more that I'm not aware of? I think that's a danger of just going in blind and doing it on your own as a team of one without getting research. I think it's a dangerous road, one of those two to go down.
That's such a cool insight, because I mean, in your community, you were telling me like you have like 4,000 or 5,000 people like integrating and communicating. Do you feel that there's amongst the community that kind of like sentiment of like, for some people, design is that, like something like kind of like random, or something maybe to do more with aesthetics or with even taste, and it's like, oh, just someone came up with this great thing, and that devaluates their jobs and their. Do you get that kind of feeling?
Yeah, but I think probably no more than anyone who works in a commercial sector, right? So I used to be a designer in a commercial space, and I was head of design at an agency that just worked on pro-social projects. And the charity sector, as clients, they're more likely, because they are slightly behind the commercial sector, to think that there is this magician who's just earning ideas coming to the top of your head. So the first battle of working with them as a client is to help them understand the process that we go through, why we make decisions. And we used to drill our designers really hard so they would do practice crits with us before they go to a client. And we'd all be like dicks with them, like, why is that green? And they weren't allowed to have the answer because I like green, because that's just subjective nonsense. Why is it green? Because we would need to have an answer for a client that is just, yeah, I came up with it because I liked it. Because the client then has got equal weight to say, well, I don't like it. I want to know the reasoning why you've made that decision on behalf of the solution, if that makes sense. Yeah. So yeah, I think our community is like that, but how many designers in the room? Who has a situation where the client hasn't understood design at first? Yeah, it's a design thing. It's the cross we bear, I guess.
Cool. And you wanted to add something?
Yeah. Has anyone heard of Jobs to be Done? Yeah. Have you heard of Alan Clement? So he's somebody who talks about job to be done, and he was having, he can be interesting on Twitter. He can be quite challenging with people, and he was having a discussion with Jared Spool. And you heard of Jared Spool? He's quite well known in sort of design circles, and Alan Clement was saying if you only talk to users about what their problems are, you will never create anything new, because you're not looking at what they're trying to achieve or how they're trying to improve their lives. And he kept using the iPhone as an example. And Jared Spool was like, have you any idea how much research went into the iPhone to understand why it came about? Steve Jobs didn't just wake up one day and go, oh, iPhone would be a brilliant idea. I'll kill all keyboards. He will. And I don't know the details behind it, but I imagine you may have been doing research or watching people use it, and actually they might be trying to watch YouTube videos. And actually you can't watch much of a YouTube video if half your phone is taken up by a keyboard. So that may have been why do we need a physical keyboard? Or physical keyboards might clog up, or the keys might get stuck, or it might be harder to type. So Steve Jobs would have used research to make that decision. He wouldn't have just pulled it out of his arse and just thought, oh yeah, iPhones kill keyboards. And so it was an interesting discussion, because Alan Clement, he is a bit like a dog with a bone, because he's been doing it with personas at the minute as well, with Kim Goodwin and Alan Cooper. So he's an interesting guy to follow on Twitter. He had some useful points, but it's always worth picking up on the iPhone thing, that suddenly it was like a magical thing that suddenly Steve Jobs created. He must have recognised needs that weren't currently being met by BlackBerries.
Mm-hmm. So I think we kind of established that design cannot happen in a vacuum, right? And we need to be in contact with the people that are actually going to use it and understand them well. So there's this analogy that I like very much from my design mentor, Javier Cañada. I'm from Spain. This guy's from there as well. And he has this theory of that if you look too much at your customers, you might end up in a, do you remember the film Wall-E, where people were like taken in this like hovercraft and they didn't need to get dressed, or they were fed food directly and things like that, right? Like, I mean, that's an extreme example, but basically this guy comes to say, if you design everything thinking on kind of like optimization and what the problem to be solved, that is like, I want to be fed, you might end up in that kind of solution, right? That is not really what people, you could argue, need. Is that something that you face in any way? Lorna, we were talking before about like training and like sports apps. Like, do you see any risk on that?
Yeah, so I'd like to think that's not how things would end up. And yeah, just personally speaking, where I work at the moment, we have a lot of fitness and nutrition brands. And so we've been doing a lot of research into fitness sports tracking apps. And there's just so many of them out there. There's obviously such a demand. You know, some of them are linked to devices that you wear as well. And so I don't think user needs are always going to be around making life easier, or I don't have to do something now. The user need could be I really need to get fit. So maybe I'm just being optimistic, but yeah, I'd like to think that we wouldn't all end up like Wall-E or in Wall-E's world.
But it's against the user, right? Because I don't want to be tired.
Maybe.
Right? There's like a benefit that happens after you do exercise, that then you release like endorphins and whatever, and you feel great and you get whatever, healthier. But while you are doing it, right, it's like quitting smoking or whatever. Like it's painful. Like, so it's like, I don't know. How do you face that kind of problems when?
Not that I've seen. No. Do you have anything?
Yeah, the idea of, so the question I guess around is, if you just design what people need or want, you might just end up making stuff that serves like a selfish purpose, but there's no benefit. And I guess the smoking thing's interesting around, you're designing something for their benefit, but it is unpleasant. You're not giving into craving, like in a literal sense there, I guess, is the space that I work in is interesting in that regard, that we want to help make society better. So we want people to be, so generally the tech for good space or the ethical design space, you want people to be less sexist, and you want them to be less racist, and you want them to be more environmentally conscious. You want us to be more well in the general sense possible. So there is a challenge there, I guess, around designing for good or designing well will involve not just pandering to what people want. So the Wall-E thing is a really good example where that was poorly designed because, like you said, they'd not concentrated on fitness there. Like they've created this world where they're going after wants, not needs, which is what we talked around. We designed, we did a research project. We designed a prototype to help the elderly, helping prevent slips, trips, and falls in the elderly, which is like a big problem. And we partnered with Manchester University, and we're trying to see could digital help in this space at all. And the interesting thing, the research that they'd shown was old people do slip, trip, and fall. It's a really big problem. Old people don't think they slip, trip, and fall, so old people will refuse to have clear, targeted help because they just don't think this is going to happen to them. Which I can relate to epilepsy, and I know there are triggers that will make me more likely to have a seizure, but I'm like, I won't have one. I'll be fine. I won't have one. So the case was, how do you design something for them without them knowing what it is that you're doing? So the idea was to create something that was around independent living, and it would contain help and things to build a habitual lifestyle that would make them less likely to fall. And there's an ethical dilemma there around if they don't know what. So the smoking thing, if you download an app that's to help you quit smoking, probably not going to say go have a cigarette. There's probably going to be manipulative patterns in there, but you're kind of fine with that because I imagine if you showed the user afterwards, here's what we did, here's the tricks that we pulled, they'll be like, that's totally fine. But there is a grey area with the slips, trips, and falls where you're helping the elderly. But if you're not being open and transparent, can you say it's ethically good? Is a dilemma there. You have it in e-commerce all the time around. Let's say you say, I want to help people go on holiday, and you're really passionate about that, and holidays are great, so that's a good thing to do, right? But if you go so far as, is it Booking.com, the one with like really crappy dark patterns all over it? One of the sites, you know what I mean? Where
someone else is saying this same thing a minute ago, right?
Okay, yeah, so like you answer, there's how is that a good thing? You're tricking the user. And I think that test case of is, as a designer, if you're happy to sit with the user after the transaction and explain to them what you did, do you think they'll be okay with it? Is maybe a good guide around, did we cross some boundaries there with the stuff that we did? Was it ethical or not?
That's really cool that you're bringing that up, because I think it moves nicely into the next part that is about the constraints, right? Like, do you feel that business needs can constrain all this empathy that designers tend to have? And like, I don't know, is that something that you face in the co-op, for example? Like greater levels of importance of things?
I think people sometimes forget. Even in the co-op, so the co-op is quite an ethical company. It's owned by its members. It tries to do the right thing. It exists to earn profit, to then sink it back into local communities to make communities better. So it sells itself as a different way of doing business. But they still need to make profit. So there is always this it's always this really difficult tolerance between the business has to make money, but equally you can't really make. I suppose you could make money by shafting users, but I don't think it'd sit right with everyone who we hired to work in digital. And it's not. It sort of goes against co-op values. So the co-op's an interesting one because it would try not to, but I think it slips into it because it can't help itself. Because you've got so many. What I find, certainly when I worked in government for the Department for Work and Pensions, and you have the same challenge. It's sort of people are driven by targets and numbers, but targets and numbers you can't empathise with targets and numbers. So even if you do quant research, nobody gives a toss about 10,000 people said blah, 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 unless it's going to make you a lot of money. But when you start talking about people's lives and the impact it can possibly have on them, it can really change things. So I worked on the will service for co-op. So co-op sells wills, and you can't really put a will online, not all of it, because it's a complicated thing. People need assurance it's the right thing to do. It needs human contact. And so we push back on the design quite a lot, saying, yeah, I know we're digital, but it doesn't mean so everything's suitable for the web. So there is a phone call after it. But the business was like, yeah, but, we want to do the phone calls only because it's cheaper to do phones. And we were like, yeah, but what about elderly people or people who can't use the phone? It's like, oh, yeah, we don't really want to provide wills for them. It's like, what do you mean you don't want to provide wills? What happens as people get older? That tends to be when they need to start thinking about wills because a loved one dies or they come into money or they get grandchildren. And to cut out that area of the market, it's a huge, huge sum of money to say, oh, well, if people can't use a phone, tough. So you sometimes need to provide evidence and show people's lives, show the impact it is, go out and talk to people who might be deaf or hard of hearing or have a speech impediment. You couldn't use a phone and talk to them about the difficulties they've had getting a will and then play video back to people. And as soon as people can empathise with individuals far more than they can with numbers. So I'm predominantly a qual researcher. That's how I would try and break that. Because businesses have goals, they don't have needs. They're trying to their goal is to make profit. I would shy away from saying businesses have needs, personally.
Interesting. I'm thinking this probably for you, Lorna. In e-commerce and particularly in fashion, I see, well, there's all this trend of stop photoshopping the pictures of models, so people can relate and not feel necessarily bad about an image of something that doesn't really even exist. It's not just that it's a tiny percentage of population, that it doesn't even exist. It's a Photoshop of someone that is already 1%. Do you see that trend happening? Do you see has that something to do with empathy, or is business behind? Or
definitely, yeah. So I guess while I was at Shop Direct, because that's very kind of they've got fashion brands, very .co.uk in Littlewoods. Now, what Shop Direct did was build a kind of purpose-built user testing lab on site, and that enabled them to bring the customer actually into the business, so stakeholders could come in, and that facility is kind of at their disposal to run testing sessions. And kind of where it does is because, yeah, the business has a perception of what the perfect user might be in their head, but when stakeholders come in and see users using the website and see them facing real problems, that's when the penny can really drop. And that really helps stakeholders get into the shoes of the customer, if you like. And it doesn't have to be an all singing, all dancing, expensive lab setup. You can start off quite homemade. That's what they did. That's what we do in other places. And there's plenty of other exercises you can run as well. So it's like empathy mapping, personas. Personas are kind of debated in some fields, but I've seen it really get stakeholders round into buying into, does our customer want this? So I think there's plenty of methods you can use in order to try and get the business round, because otherwise people can see customers as just a number to say, if we do this, the numbers will go up by this much. But you can't force your users, or you can't shaft your users, because it's only going to come back around.
What about when shareholders? I wonder if, for example, in your case, Jonny, with working with the lottery fund, as far as I understand, that has funding from different entities, or not? Is all the lottery? As in, do you face constraints of how the whole thing is structured in terms of, like, I don't know, projects that you cannot tackle because they contradict with something that other people are working already on, or things like that? I guess my question is, like, is there, like, organizational constraints?
Yeah, so our money is a weird scenario. So it's public funds, basically, is kind of how it works. So there is governmental oversight with that kind of stuff. So in terms of maybe themes that we might want to tackle, whether we want to do something around something like loneliness or homelessness, yeah, there are issues that you'd have to look around in terms of who else is working that space. Not just to make sure that wouldn't mean we couldn't do it, but the money's best spent if we work with someone who's already doing that. And business goals are really important to a designer. The thought of more and more designers embracing and understanding business goals is amazing, because design without constraints is just nonsense. Monzo is a good example where I use Monzo. It's great. I love Monzo, right? You'll have business goals. You'll have KPIs that you have to hit. Your designers clearly understand them. Your team understands them because Monzo is successful and it's doing well. If you just went off and did your own thing and ignored the constraints of the organization, it would be disastrous for you as a company, but also for me as a customer, right? It's, like, super important. And can business goals reduce the empathy of a designer? If it does, if the business goals are forcing you to do something you think is wrong, you don't do it. And you don't do it, and you don't do it, and you leave if they don't change. That's what you do. If it's wrong, there are some I used to have gambling clients, which are like monsters. Like, it's awful. So I left. Like, just, if it's not good, leave. So now I'm trying to cleanse my soul, and I'll be doing that for eternity until I end up in hell. But there are also where the business goals could be fine, but the designers can. But the idea that the company is the bad thing, that we're the shining angels pushing back. The Booking.com, think if it is them, the goal of selling holidays is not inherently wrong. It's the people who've made those design decisions. They've fucked up the business goals, not the other way around. So you can work harmoniously together. And I think this relationship of the business people pushing hard at the designers and the designers pushing hard back, that's, I think, where you get the gold in that kind of middle ground. I think there has to be an understanding of both, and good designers who can sell empathy to the business people.
I guess you can articulate. Is there any Booking.com designer here in the room?
It may not have been them as well.
Grab them.
At least it's not being recorded. It may not have been them. It was a holiday site recently.
But question, you can justify that. Like, for example, like hotel rooms or flights or whatever, they are more expensive to book tomorrow than today, right? Like, they get more and more expensive. So you could justify that, making those tricky things of saying, someone else is checking this room, someone else just booked this room, do it now. It's actually saving you money if you wanted that room, and if without those things you will do it tomorrow, so you will end up paying more.
Even if those things aren't true. If you lie to a user to save them money, have you done a good thing?
Yeah.
If you tell the user afterwards that we just sold you a pack of lies and we've profited off that, yeah, you save some money, but also we've profited, I don't think that's good.
So you think it's the job of the designer to be able to fight that battle?
To say no, yeah. It's the job of the designer who designed the privacy settings on Facebook to leave and say, no, we're deliberately fucking with people here. We're deliberately making this so you can't understand it. They should have all left. It's what they should have done. That would be good design. We had Mike Montero on the Tech for Good podcast recently, and he said an interesting thing, that there's no such thing as a well-designed gun. It's badly designed. It's bad design because its purpose is to kill someone. I think that there may be different opinions in the room on that, but the idea that there is a line in the sand that we should draw as professionals is interesting, because it troubles me that, like, when you're making products in the pro-social sector, it was very different. I thought it would be a breeze from the commercial sector, that it would be really easy and quite wishy-washy. Everyone would be a hippie and a vegan and we'd all hug trees and stuff. But you realise very quickly, if I made a mistake as a designer there, it wasn't that the company lost some money. Best case scenario, a charity has one less hospice bed, which is awful. Or the worst case is, and genuinely this is an issue, some of the products we made, if we made the mistakes that we nearly did, people die. It's like, that's serious. And like, I'm not, like, developers can go to jail now. That happened recently in America, that you can be held to, remember that Volkswagen thing? You can be held to account to some extent to this stuff. But it does trouble me that the products I've made, even when I work for bad companies, are still out there. I don't get the chance to go and sit down with the users and explain myself to them. And it's troubling that to me. Working with the gambling companies, I was definitely responsible for driving people into debt and into despair. And I played an active role in that. And it properly troubles me. It does properly haunt me. I don't get the chance to explain that. And yeah, that's an example. But there is middle grounds around that. The holiday purchase that you push and push and push and you get someone to buy. What if they actually couldn't have afforded that holiday? What if they just made a bad financial decision? When do we say the designer is to be held to account for not understanding the wider situation rather than just a narrow focus of the products that we made? The privacy settings, yeah, you end up going to some ads, which is a bit crap on Facebook. But some of those settings really mess with people. People who weren't ready to come out as being homosexual. Those privacy settings royally screwed them, and it was out there, and they faced real issues. Do we hold ourselves to enough account as designers? What we do is great and wonderful, but there's a big responsibility for it. Like, imagine if you messed up the privacy, or the developers of Monzo, imagine if you messed that up. It's people's financial stuff. I mean, there's checks.
We would never mess up.
You know, you wouldn't. Yeah.
Thank you.
But the reason is
it's
because
very
there's
serious.
more governance on that financial. There's more governance on that financial stuff and legal consequence than there is in someone designing a privacy setting. And we're not held to account the way that other sectors are, I don't think.
Yeah, it's highly regulated, and I think it kind of leads on this last section before the questions from the audience that was about impact. So in the case of banking, that I know a bit, it's quite easy because the government is behind drawing the lines of like, hey, this is unacceptable, this is unacceptable. You need to work in the middle, right? In general, we move even in a narrower space because we have morale and like we are good people, so that's great. But other industries don't have that, right? So who do you think should define what means good and bad in these things? So if you are working, for example, in the co-op digital, and you have so many products and so many things, like who defines there what's a good outcome for a customer?
Co-op's an interesting one because it's commercial, but it's not out there to scalp everyone as much as it possibly can. So we are owned by our members. So God, I sound like I'm trying to sell the co-op. I do apologise, but so we're owned by our members, so we're accountable to our members. So every member has a vote. So recently, Stop Funding Hate was on at the court for a long, long time about. You shouldn't be advertising in the Mail, the Sun, the Express, because wary I'm being filmed, so I'm going to try and plan my words carefully. But they're hateful bastards, and really the co-op shouldn't be associating with that. And it's a democracy, so the members got together, and many of it who supported that motion put it forward to the board and at the AGM, and it's only just gone the AGM this weekend, and it was put to should the co-op stop advertising in the Mail, the Express, and the Sun. So not stop selling it, because a huge number of our customers pop round to the shop to buy a paper. It's people's choice, but we could decide not to advertise in there. And our argument was we're going to try and influence the Mail, the Express, and the Sun. And got put to a vote at the weekend, and our members voted and said, no, you shouldn't be advertising in there. 96% of members voted to say, don't be part of them. So we still sell them. So, yeah, the board was trying to do the right thing, and what they believed was right. So it's an ethical company. It does have values that it tries to stick to, and that's one of the main reasons I joined. So I worked in DWP for 17, 18 years. Make of working for them what you will. There were many people trying to do the right thing, but it's almost the reverse of commercial. Government's about saving money, particularly at the minute, and that saving money means impacting people's lives, sometimes in a way that could be seen as negative. And it's a difficult balance, and it's as a researcher, it's my job to play the human element, because you'll have loads of people from the business steaming in going, yeah, but we've got to save money or make money. But actually, you have less people standing up for the user. And I'd say it's anyone who's got an ethical bone in their body should at least be pushing back in the other direction. I kind of get where I think I probably eventually couldn't continue from a conscience perspective. I think I'd had enough of government and had to. I'd fought many battles, and many people had. And I think I just got tired, and I assumed the co-op would be nice and breezy, like you said, full of hippies and people dead happy in it, knitting their own yogurts and stuff like that. But it such an old Jasper Carrot joke, so I'm really showing my age. But it fits with my ideals to work for a company that's trying to do that. But I'm in quite a lucky position. I've got a few years of experience. I came with a good reputation from the work. I think it might be harder if I was starting out. I do agree that you have to walk sometimes and go, I'm not party to this. But if you've got a mortgage in a house, I imagine it's a really difficult thing. So there's various companies I could have gone and worked for, and I just couldn't live with myself for doing it.
I hear that one a lot. The one of, yeah, that's very nice to say, but I have a mortgage and blah blah.
Yeah.
You, like, passing the question to Lorna, do you see, because you run the Ladies That UX here in Liverpool, when you talk with other designers and UX designers, do you see that that's a thing, like people being forced by their circumstances to do things that they are not really happy with?
So Ladies at UX Liverpool's only had 2 meetups so far, and we haven't got like that big of an audience yet. So the 3rd meetup soon.
So Ladies That UX.
Yeah, it's not just for ladies either. We have guys that come too, so guys are more than welcome. The next one's a designing. It's a empathy mapping workshop, so quite on topic. Please come. I think maybe just to go off on a bit of a tangent, I just wanted to talk about how I was at an accessibility event last week, and in terms of technology having an impact, and for good or not for good, something that was really interesting was the kind of development of AI and voice UI, and how that kind of technology has been in the realms of disability and disabled people for a long time and been quite neglected. And now the development work that's happening with AI is actually seeing that absolutely kind of blossom. And I think that's going to be like a really exciting space for people to work in. Going back to the ethical thing, and having people, perhaps to say, do I want to design this? Should I be designing this? I've seen that over the years as well. And I kind of agree with your point, whereas you can get to a place where you can say, look, am I going to do this or am I not? Am I going to stay in this job? Or am I going to look for something else which is kind of more suited to my ethics? And I think they're just all choices that everyone has to make at some point as designers, especially if you find yourself in an extreme industry like gambling or something similar.
So now that this is completely kind of off topic, but you've mentioned this thing of technologies that were kind of created for accessibility, like voice recognition and all this. Did you see this demo of Google that they have this technology that allows them to call to restaurants and book things on your behalf and whatnot?
Yeah, so the one that booked a hairdressing appointment, and it was really scary.
Has people seen this video? So
there's also the Xbox controller that was released last week.
Yeah.
For accessibility, you can
This
put,
big one.
30 devices.
So in the case, I really want to know your opinions. Do you think that a machine giving a phone call to a human being without this human knowing that it's a machine on the other end, it's wrong? Yes, no.
Personally, I think it is wrong. I think Google might have put out a statement now. I think it was mentioned that if they're going to do that, they're going to alert the end user first. I don't think it's nice to be tricked, so I say, yeah, wrong.
Do you think it's wrong? What do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely
wrong.
Yeah, that you're lying to people.
Okay.
Definitely. I ranted about this for like 45 minutes on the Tech for Good Live podcast, and then the day after they did the statement, and then the day after that the podcast went live. It's like, you motherfuckers! Like, yeah, thanks for that timing. It's creepy as well, but also wrong. the creepiness made me feel it was more wrong than I think it was, because that's how we're all going to die, I'm convinced. We always knew it'd be Google, but now we know the voice that we'll hear just before it goes dark.
Being playing devil's advocate, if a person calls you but is following a guidebook, like a playbook, and they don't get from that algorithm, is that better? If a person is replicating which really happens, right? Like you get these phone calls that they try to sell you something, and that person is literally following an algorithm. Is that worse?
Yeah, I think so, because it's still. I think it is the fact that you weren't aware that the thing was having a conversation with you wasn't human.
But you weren't aware that this human had a playbook that is going to...
Yeah, exactly. But I think you can have the interaction. There is a whole ethical thing around that, but they will go off script if you're talking to them. I think it was the device put into it, which you can imagine the voice designers saying, "Oh, this is making it sound more human." You're the ums and the arms, but they were to convince you this was a human being. So there was no premise. The statement that's come out, so we're going to tell you, is after the fact, knee-jerk reaction, because the whole design of that voice UI was so that you didn't know it wasn't a human being. And I mean, I imagine that was a demo. It was really impressive as well. I imagine it was a demo. But if it's not, you get super humiliated if you're that person working. And imagine if it was you, like my mum would be calling me up saying, "Oh, you muppet, you got completely tricked by that voice I saw on the internet." Like, it's just, yeah.
So interesting.